Hello, my name is Ray Hughes, and I'm an interviewer for the Veterans History Project conducted by the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. and locally administered here at the Cincinnati-Hamilton County Public Library at 9th and Walnut Streets, and locally administered by Brian Powers, who happens to be our cameraman today. Today's date is the 29th of July, 2019, and today we have the honor and privilege of interviewing United States Air Force veteran, a Fulbright Colonel, Mr. Colonel Neil Calvin Ray.
Oh, I never get the Calvin.
It's a pleasure to meet you. Is it all right just to call you Neil today, Colonel?
That'd be great, yeah, that'd be great.
If you would, Colonel, what's your date of birth and where were you living when you were born?
I was born December 21st, 1935, in a very small village in northwestern Pennsylvania. Very rural, grocery store, and that's about it.
What was the name of the village?
Well, Wentling's Corners, because two roads intersected there, and that's where the grocery store was that my grandfather had, and my father took over afterward. So
that was Knox, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, that's the nearest town, 3 miles, 1,500 people.
Oh, okay.
We were country.
Yeah. And what were your parents' names?
Well, my father was Calvin Ray, and my mother, who previously Phyllis Whitehill, became Phyllis Ray.
And what was her maiden name again?
Whitehill.
Whitehill?
Whitehill, yes.
What did your father do for a living? You know?
He was basically an oil and gas field worker. When I was a little child, he went to Illinois and worked in a new oil field in southern Illinois. So I went to one-room school there for a while until we moved back to Pennsylvania to take over the store. So I have a lot of country behind me.
What did you do, take over the grocery store there?
Of my grandfather's when he retired.
Oh.
A very small thing, and he got very tired of that and went back to the oil industry, but he did it for a while. So.
What was your grandfather's name?
Walter Whitehill. That was my mother's father, who had the grocery store. And Ida Mae Whitehill, and they are all buried in that small village. On my father's side, I had less contact with them. They lived down in Uniontown, Pennsylvania, and they were also in the oil and gas industry, but Harry Ray and Nellie Ray, she passed it in their 50s, so I never really knew her. But they were good, honest, very religious people, and thankfully both grandparents loaned me a little money when I had to go to college. So,
what religion were you folks?
We were Lutherans.
Lutheran?
Yeah.
Missouri Synod?
No, we were not. We were whatever we were, St. Paul's Lutheran,
yeah.
United Lutheran, at that time.
You had a Lutheran church there in
Wentling's Corners, yep, a hilltop church. No one lives there. None of my relatives live there anymore, but all of my dead relatives are there. So I'm going back in 2 weeks, actually, to a high school reunion of about 12 people. So it's different now.
Did you have any brothers and sisters?
Yes, I have a sister who's passed, 2 years older than myself, and I've got two brothers. Well, they're both living at different levels of health.
What was your sister's name?
Anna Lee, O-N-I-L-E-E, very unusual name. Nobody knows where it came from.
Right.
But she lived in Oil City, Pennsylvania, and her husband passed. And so I have two brothers still existing, one in New York State and one who is living in Florida.
What's her name?
Well, my next younger is Darryl, my other brother Darryl, and he was just that person, a Navy veteran who got out and wished he hadn't. My youngest brother lives in Florida, and he's been an entrepreneurial guy, and he's lost it many times, and he's struggling now at age 77 because of that.
What's his name?
Stanley.
Stanley?
Yeah, Stanley.
What schools did you go to, Neil?
Well, I went to the country schools in Illinois, single room, went back to Pennsylvania, and lo and behold, they were still in a one-room school. So I finished the last half of sixth in a one-room school. Same teacher that my mother had in that same school. It was small, to say the least.
And after the sixth grade, where'd you go?
We went to a consolidated school in the town of Knox. They brought in numerous one-room schools, and so things got better. It still wasn't a very good education high school-wise, but it was better than it was in the country.
So after the 8th grade, where'd you go to high school at?
It was in the town of Knox. It's called
okay.
the district school. How they pull them all together from all the countryside. And but even then, I learned when I went to Penn State, I wasn't very well prepared.
Did you play any sports in high school?
I don't brag about that. I lettered, but never played. I was the only guy that dressed for junior varsity and varsity and played in neither. That's my claim to fame. So I dropped out after my junior year and got a job at a local grocery store, make a little money.
Did you finish high school?
Oh yes, sure.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. I was an honor student. There were all 4 of us, I think. It was a very small school.
And you had a job at the grocery store too at the same time?
It's not our grocery store, a different grocery store. They did it just like they do now. They called in their order and we got it ready and delivered it. It's very much like Amazon.
Now, did you folks have a car and stuff like that, or did you live on a farm with horses or anything?
No. I had relatives that did, and I worked and hoed corn and so on. I have an aunt who had a large farm. I worked in the hay mow with straw, all the dirty stuff to get $1 a day. But there was no work around except that kind of thing. So when I was in college, there was no work.
After high school, what did you do after you graduated from high school?
Well, I wanted to go to college, but there's a question of money, obviously. And my dad and mother both working full time in the store. I think they were making about $300 a month, and this is a big deal at college. So they thought I should go. The principal had talked to them, said I should go. So I got money from both grandparents, and on a loan, I signed a form and everything, and went off to Penn State, where I struggled because I wasn't well prepared from high school. Thought about joining the Air Force, and my 6th grade educated grandmother said, "Neil, you don't drop out. You go on, you get out, you'll find a girl, you'll get married, you'll have children, you'll never get a college degree." And her wisdom was right. I stayed, I switched curriculum, something I could handle better, graduated in ROTC, and the rest is history, as they say.
What year did you graduate from Penn State?
In January of 1958.
And you had been participating in the ROTC, Reserve Officers Training Course?
Yeah, I was on the flight track, and I'd gotten out in January, went to work in a local meat market, and I was one day cutting hamburger and had stuff all over me, and the ROTC professor of air science came in. And I said, "Sir," and I was wiping my hands, I said, "I wonder when I'm going to be called to active duty." And he looked at me and said, "I take it you want to go soon?" I said, "As soon as possible." And next week I had my letter to report to LAC on April 24th, 58. So I was out of town at that point and on my way.
Did you have ambitions at that time of being a pilot?
Well, I didn't know anyone had ever flown. I mean, I had no background. I always wanted to be a hero or show the hometown that I could do something. One day I was out at a local lake and I was talking to somebody about that. He said, "That guy over there flew in Korea. You ought to go talk to him." And I said, what does it take to be a pilot? He said, "You can do it. Anybody can do it. You just have to try." And that sort of did it, and I stuck with that track and that went on my way. But what I did decide, and it's been my philosophy all along, which is tenacity. I watch people, what we call SIE, self-initiated elimination. I just can't feature myself flying this. I can't feature myself. And I decided they're going to have to wash me out. If I can't do it, they'll tell me. And that served me well.
Well, tell us about after you arrived at Lackland. Did they shave your head and you go through the whole thing of basic?
This isn't the Marines. I know your background is different from mine, but they put a good old master sergeant in charge of us and marched. It was mainly get out of the college stuff out of your blood and become a military person. Yeah. Drill and ceremonies, uniform, classes on. It's only about 4 weeks, called pre-flight. It's not exactly basic training, but for calisthenics and all of that, just to make sure you're ready to be an officer. Because even though you got that rank, you don't have it up here yet. You know that.
Now, did you go in as a second lieutenant?
Yes, yeah. I got that pinned on at graduation at the ROTC building. And so you walk out and I gave that $1 salute in January of '58 to one of the NCOs there. So
So you finished your indoctrination then,
Yeah.
which is roughly 4 weeks at Lackland.
Right.
Then where do you go?
Okay, off to Malden, Missouri. And Malden, Missouri is a contract base. There were military people there. They were the Czech pilots, man, but these are civilian pilots. And I think to a man, they're all World War II pilots. And so the first aircraft we flew was the T-34 Mentor, single engine.
T-34.
Mentor, I think, is the proper acronym for it. Not an acronym, but name. And they were trying to wash people out early because, it's wasted to let a guy fly. So people were falling away pretty fast in that. But these are civilian instructors, almost all of them World War II pilots. My guy was Dewey. He was a nice guy, soft-spoken. Some of them were screamers and yellers, get you to wash out and panic. But my guy was calm, and that was good for me. So, yeah, it was good. And they get done T-34, then they say, now the T-28. Now that airplane almost beat me. It's a big airplane, and it's got lots of torque. And you try to do a stall, your right leg gets bigger and stronger because that airplane wants to roll. And so I thought it was going to get the better of me because it's just so big. But I got through that as well, and my instructor was very, very patient with me because I like to do spins. I didn't realize that it was a terrible thing for him in the back seat because of the G's and so on. But yeah, I had friends wash out, but I did a lot of cockpit time, sit out on the ramp, and go through what you think you're doing. I mean, this is doing, and it worked for me. And so then, when we're done at Malden and you graduate there, now that's primary. They called it primary at that time. Then they send you off to basic, and basic was at Craig Air Force Base, Alabama. And that was T-33. Now you're in jets, and now this kind of awe-inspiring, and it smells different. There's diesel smell in the air, and it was quite different.
Were you apprehensive about the jet?
It wasn't because it was a jet. It was because you had to do things like fly in close formation, and that has a certain technique to it, which scared my instructor very badly, because this is going to be a long interview. I was flying on wing by myself. The instructor's here with another student. And when you turn together, you have to go down and to hold relative position. However, I was slow in doing that. And you can see the wings are crossed at this point, and I'm trying to get away, but he wouldn't talk to me the rest of the day at all. When we got on the ground, he was trembling so badly. The squadron commander said, I'll take you up tomorrow, no problem. And it was no problem. It was just a momentary lapse that everybody has, and that's why students are students.
Right.
I never had another incident like that in my life, but it was a serious one.
So that's advanced?
They called it basic.
Basic.
Primary and basic. And then on June the 10th, I got the wings, and we had the ceremony and the drill, and you're blessed. Now you have to learn how to be an officer and a good pilot. You've got the basic stuff under your belt.
So where did you go from there?
Well, that was B-47s, which is a long sequence of training now. We've gone to the B-47. At the time, I wanted to be an F-86 pilot. Everybody wants to be a fighter pilot. But I think we got one F-86 and 2 or 3 Mac backs. A SAC was building out the B-47s. I think about 60% of my class got B-47s. And it was good for me in the end.
Now you're going to go into Strategic Air Command?
Correct.
And when is this?
I got out about 59, summer 59. And my ultimate assignment is to Schilling Air Force Base, Kansas. But before I go there, I have to do academics at McConnell in Wichita, and from there to Forbes Air Force Base for the flying phase in the B-47, and then report to Schilling. So I reported to Schilling in January of 60, I think it was, and went on a crew. And as I was telling you, it's a different airplane than most people understand it to be in terms of the history of the airplane. And
that's a 6-engine bomber?
Yeah, should I expound on that at all? Because the airplane was new in the 50s when this concept, World War II information with the Germans. It was the first swept wing, thin wing, jet, the gear, the bicycle landing gear, and that was because there's no place for wings wheels in the wing. But beyond that, it had structural issues, but it was designed to be a high-altitude bomb delivery system, and that was okay. But it had its frailties, and we weren't too far into the program. Before I got there, they started having massive problems, structural problems, which they did a modification before I got there and cut down on some of the losses. But to give you an idea and compare it to the numbers of airplanes we have today, there are over 2,000 of them made. And of the 2,000, over 220 were involved in fatal accidents. So just sitting at Schilling in the summer of, I think it was 63, we had nearby bases at Little Rock and Forbes and Topeka and Schilling. Those three bases, in 22 months, we lost 8 aircraft. And at Lincoln, they lost, in the spring of 63, they lost 3 consecutive months. They were in almost open rebellion. The wives were refusing to let their husband out of the house. Then some of the men were wanting to not. They couldn't explain it. There were always different reasons. They weren't consistent. So a lot of people, we lost 3 in my 4 years at Schilling, but some places did much worse than that. It demanded precise handling. If you let it get nose down, you're not going to pull out of that. It's too clean. We had a lot of close calls, like that. People who pulled out of a dive that blew the gear doors off, and the navigator was trying to eject, but he couldn't pull his handles because it was too much G-force getting it. So those kind of things, those weren't crashes, but there were a lot of cases where and that carried over to like my flying the B-52, which wasn't that sensitive, but I was out in Castle and I was doing like this when I was refueling. He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "That's why it's a habit from the B-47. You had to keep it like that." But the B-52, it wasn't that way, but that was a habit I had. He said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I just can't shake that habit."
When you were doing refueling, was that from a KC-97?
Initially, the problem with that whole deal was that we had to have more speed than the KC-97 could provide when we got heavy weights. So we would start refueling in level flight. And as we got heavier and heavier, we would call toboggan. And at that point, the KC-97 would go into a descent, about 300 feet per minute, I believe it was, so they could hold the speed that we needed or would be in stall. And you can't have that.
Right.
The other problem with B-47 is the compressor stalled. So if you did much of this, you might have an engine blow up, you hang up and throw blades into your fuel tanks. So that's, and just another thing about the B-47 before we get off of it, we did have an engine explosion and fire on a number 4 engine rather, coming out of low level, and it's pretty interesting. It was daytime, fortunately. And we declared an emergency, then got into a base, and all these people out there with the cameras to see a burning B-47. But as it turned out, we were okay. But the fear there is you throw turbine blades into the body of the aircraft, which had fuel tanks. That was the concern, of course. And we got put a SAC crew of the month and all that stuff. But that you have to have somebody to put up until they put us up. So anyway, so that's basically the airplane. It was being phased out, and when I went to B-50, I didn't also mention, Jesus, it's going to be a long interview, the duties on board the B-47.
Now, you're a co-pilot?
I'm the co-pilot, navigator, pilot, and co-pilot. So a lot of those duties in the bigger airplane fell to the co-pilot. I shot the sextant for the navigator and also pre-comped for him, with him. And then I was also the gunner, which was 20 millimeter cannons in the rear. My seat rotated around. I had a radar set, hand control to lock onto the enemy aircraft. And also in the headset, I'm listening to receptors of the frequency. The fighters, I remember still raster scan. One fighter had a certain kind of thing. You turn on certain jammers and so on. So you're the ECM officer too. Sometimes you actually flew the airplane, occasionally. But you really had a job of coordination that was primary. You did most all the radio calls and that sort of thing. So it's different.
How long were you flying in a B-47?
till nearly 5 years. Events in that time period, I think I mentioned earlier to you when we were talking about it, I was on alert one night, and it was at nighttime the klaxon went off. We ran the airplanes, got in, started as usually do, and this is unusual. Practices are always in daytime. This is nighttime, moonlight night. So we crank engines, and usually we get a call. This is the yellow dot, shut down your engines. It didn't come. We all sit there, and finally all the lights are flashing, all the bombers are sitting there, and static, stand by. Stand by, Sky King, stand by. Stand by, Sky King, stand by. This goes on and on. And there's excitement in the guy's voice. And so he says, stand by for blue dot. Now, yellow dots were practiced. They'd usually say, there's a yellow dot, shut down your engines and go back to quarters. Blue dot, we're going to proceed for actual launch. But we're not launching, but we'll go. If it's a red dot, you're off to war. It's executed. He said, stand by for blue dot, which meant we're prepared to taxi to take off into the runway. When that happened, I had a decoding thing in a grease pencil. I literally dropped my pencil because my hands were trembling because, this is it,
Right.
Well, as you may remember, it was the radars at Clear Alaska and in England detected 2 fans were penetrated inbound missile. But in fact, it was the moon. The moon broke those 2 fans and set off the whole strategic warning system. And I think some tankers were actually launched because they didn't have weapons, But it was a big scare, that was one. The other one of the B-47 story was that when Kennedy made the announcement about Cuba, and he said it in the afternoon. We watched it, we cheered. Went back to the room, we got a telephone call, report your mobility gear. That night on C-54, we flew to Columbus, and right behind us were 3 B-47s loaded with nukes. And we set up our own, it was a dispersal plan, because we sent some to Detroit, some to Columbus, and some at Schilling. And all the bases did that. So now the targeting problem for the Soviets is complicated because they have so many more targets. And so that was the other thing that we sat there for, I don't remember, until it was resolved. I can't remember the number of days we were there, living in a motel adjacent to the runway. So that's pretty much the B-47 story.
Yeah. And your B-47s at that time are loaded with what, 2 nuclear bombs?
4.
4?
4 Mark 28s, yeah. I believe it was 4, yeah, 4 Mark 28s. We started out with a great big guy. I'm having trouble with my numbers. We did carry one great big Mark 36. I don't remember. It was a very big one. But we did go to Mark 28s later. And I'm a little confused because we always had Mark 28s in the B-52. We usually carried 4 on that one.
So any other stories about during the Cuban Missile Crisis?
No, not really. It's just that we didn't know when it was going to, where it was going to end. There was a certain tension there that it's been replayed so much in the media. You go back to what did I really think? Our biggest problem is we had to run our own command post. We had to learn how to set up an HF set to receive the messages. It's all in the books, but they'd never done it before. Crew members putting up an HF antenna and manning our own command post, our own guns and our own classified. We are our own command post for 3 airplanes. And yes, it's in books, but nothing ever goes that way. So it was quite an experience. Glad it ended nicely.
So this is that's October of '62, isn't it?
Yeah, about that time.
So after that crisis, where did you go?
Well, obviously they were phasing out the B-47s, and Schilling Air Force Base was going to shut down. They'd built the runways for B-52s and everything, but it wasn't going to happen. And so we left in January of '65, although the base didn't really close down until that summer. But we all went our various ways. And of course, in my case, it was two big things happened in January of 1965. I was 1 month into my marriage, which is one of the brightest spots in my history. and 1 month into heading to California to train the B-52.
Let's go back just a little bit
Sure.
then. Tell us, you're going to get married in January of '65?
Well, we actually got married in December
Of
'64. Yeah.
Tell us about who your wife is and her name, her full name, and how you folks met. And
Oh, that story is so long.
that's all right.
Oh, no. Okay, well, my
Her
wife,
name
Martha Ray, not the comedian.
and her maiden name was
Well, Keller.
Keller.
Yeah.
That was her maiden name.
Swedish, yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And,
And
tell us how you first met her and how you got engaged. And
Martha, I apologize. I mentioned it to him earlier, and he wants to hear it. Okay. We were overseas a lot. We deployed 23 days at a time with the B-47 to England, Morocco, Spain, Alaska, Guam, all those places. So we were gone an awful lot. My roommate and I seldom saw each other. The weekend was coming up. I had a nice little convertible. I didn't have anything to do.
Well, do you have a Carmen Ghia convertible?
Robin Egg, Carmen Ghia convertible. I'd just broken up with a girl, and I didn't have a thing to do that weekend. So I looked down at my desk, though, and there was my fraternity magazine with the conclave scheduled in Oklahoma University that weekend. I said, holy cow, that's great. So I got in my car, and I headed south, went down there.
Was your roommate with you?
No, he's in Europe somewhere.
Oh, okay.
On alert.
You're by yourself.
Yeah, nothing to do. So I got into town after dusk at the university and drove by the fraternity house, and it was dark. So I went to the student union. I said, is Acacia having a conclave? They said, well, they had one last year. Ba-boom. I was a year late. I was looking at an old manual. So I turned around, drove back north. I stayed overnight and then headed north. Stopped in Wichita. The sailplanes were going to bummed a ride with the guys and feeling pretty good about things. Left there, heading back up to Schilling, up to the middle of Kansas, going through the little Swedish town of Lindsborg. And Lindsborg, I remembered 2 or so years ago, my roommate and I were driving around scouting, and we met 2 girls sitting in a car. And we pulled up alongside, and the girl on our side was very, very friendly. It was in front of her house. And that was that. And we went away. My roommate kind of liked it, so I stood back. You know, he was reticent. He was a Southern boy. And if you wanted to ask her out, go ahead. Well, nothing ever happened. I wrote it in my book, all this information. Now I'm coming up through Kansas, into Lindsborg, Kansas. Doggone, it's going to be embarrassing if I knock on the door and with that girl's house. What am I going to lose? So I pulled up in front of the house, went up and knocked on the door. A man came out. It happened. A local minister, real low voice, said, yes. And so I said, well, I met your daughter 2 years ago or so out front here with another girl in a car. He said, well, just a minute. He went back, and they were going on. She finally came back and said, oh, I remember. That was Martha. Oh, I'm engaged now. But Martha, by the way, got married and had a child, and her husband died, and she's back in town just around the corner. And I said, oh, my gosh. I said, oh, you should go over and say hi to her. I said, oh, this is not what I wanted to do. I'd like to walk backwards, you know. She said, it would mean so much. You should stop by. So my good guy thing came out, and I drove around the corner, knocked on the door, and she had called in the meantime, and it was embarrassing, and I finally got out of there, backed out, and got away. But later I thought, well, yeah, man, stop by there on my way to the lake, you know, and say hello at least. He's a nice person. And anyhow, that began the whole thing. And eventually we had a long night at the Officers Club, which we really found out who we are, and we dated some more. And when I got my transfer, I said, you want to go with me? And she said, what capacity? And with that, we called my mother, which locked it in. And it's been a great, great, great marriage. 55 years.
So when did you get married?
December, yeah. And I had another TDY coming up, so she had to do the whole wedding and everything. I was off to Europe again for 23 days, and then we came back and left on our so-called honeymoon to TDY, the castle. So yeah, it's been a wonderful.
And your wife had a child?
Yeah, Steve.
Steve.
And we took him all the time when we went to TDY, so she believed the family should stay together. And he's not too retarded. He's an attorney, 23 years down at Dinsmore, and now he has his practice in his home. So we've been very, very, very blessed.
Now, did you have any children?
Yeah, we had a daughter, and that's why we're in Cincinnati. She was divorced and had 2 children, and she passed from breast cancer in 2010.
And her name was?
Heather.
Heather?
Yeah. So we end up working with the kids ourselves with the father, and that was not satisfactory for the girls. So we finally got through family services, and they're placed with my son and his wife. They both have their children raised. Now they've got 2.
And your son's name?
Stephen.
Stephen?
Stephen Ray. Stephen H. Ray.
And what?
Stephen H. Ray.
Yeah. And how many grandchildren do you have?
Well, that's it. We have one, my first wedding for my son had 1 boy, and then my daughter had 2. So we have really 3 grandchildren between us.
And their names?
Oh, boy. Okay. We have Mackenzie and Madison are the girls of my daughter, and my son's is Christian, and he just graduated from Cornell grad school.
So you get married in December, and you say where do you get shipped out to?
This is Castle for training in B-52. Rented a little cottage. It was idyllic. We were doing MITO. You know what a MITO takeoff is? Close to 15 seconds. We practiced that for wartime, so you get all of them. So I told my wife one day, I said, we're going to do a MITO tomorrow. You could probably see it from the house in that water. And so she took the sun and the umbrella to watch my takeoff. Well, it turned out there was weather off of the takeoff end, so they scrubbed the MITO. We're not going to do the MITO, but we'll just take off normally. They said there was a thunderstorm off to the end. Well, it turns out as we were turning out, the lightning hit us, and we got hit really hard. Split the wing and all this stuff. Lights on everywhere. We eventually flew around. We landed and all that. But the sad part about it was my wife was out in the front yard and saw it happen.
What happened?
The lightning bolt hit us.
Oh,
okay. They had told us to turn out. There was weather, and we were in the turn when we got hit. And from her perspective, she saw the airplane, lightning bolt, airplane disappears because we were on an ascending path. So she went back in, sat down, because she knew I told her that there'd be somebody come to the door. She was ironing flight suits, which I insisted on, of course. And so she sat down, and she didn't know how long she was there, until I called after we landed in Refuelling. I thought you were lightning. I said, we were. But anyhow, those are the stories that build up over the years that make marriage.
Now, are you a pilot now on B-52s?
Now?
Then?
Well, I'm in training. Okay. I was not at the controls, actually. The instructor and the other pilot were in the seats. I was in the instructor's seat at the time, but it was very startling. We had the airplane was still broken when we left several months later. It was still had electrical problems. It was split the trailing edge of the wings and burned a hole in the empennage. And usually it rolls off a metal airplane without that much damage. So it was pretty significant. So.
How long are you there at Castle?
Oh gosh, I don't know. Several months. I've forgotten the exact times. But newlyweds were off to Loring. That's our assignment. Now we're off to Loring Air Force Base, and that was not a good experience for a new marriage because they didn't have quarters for us. They put us in the Loring Motel off base. We have 1 car. I'm in a new job, and she's sitting with the child in a 1-room motel in a rainy season, Loring, Maine. It wasn't a good start. We eventually found secondary quarters for a while. It was kind of lousy, but eventually we got on base. And before she got settled in, 6 months passed, and they sent us to Alabama for squadron officer school. So we went through that. 14 weeks, took Stephen with us.
Where at?
In Alabama.
At Maxwell?
Maxwell. And while I'm there, I find out that I'm going to be transferred to Plattsburgh. My whole time at Loring was 1 year with the squadron officers school out of it. What a deal. Nope, the people have been trying to get out of Loring for years. And here I go off to Plattsburgh, which is really a great.
And Plattsburgh is in New York.
Right on the Lake Champlain, just south of the Canadian border. Yeah.
Cold weather there also.
Yeah, but it was good, clear, cold weather. Loring is always in weather. 120 inches of snow, for instance.
And are you a pilot now on a B-52?
At that point, I'm qualified as a co-pilot, and I was because that's what they needed at the time. Although I had high time, so I went to Loring as a co-pilot, but transferred to Plattsburgh, and then at Plattsburgh, it wasn't long until I became an aircraft commander, and as soon as I did that, I was still qualified in that other seat, so I became an instructor. I understood both cockpits, and then a little time passed, and I became squadron operations officer. Things got going at that point, and then I learned that I might be competitive for Air Command Staff College, and so as I mentioned earlier, it's sort of a snowball effect. Starts. There's nothing, and then suddenly things come along as long as you do your job.
What period of time is this that you're at Plattsburgh?
Well, we got up there in 66 to 70, and then I was off to the Command Staff College. Again, back to Alabama.
And is that where the Command Staff College is?
At Maxwell.
At Maxwell?
Yeah. And
what's the purpose of that? Isn't that for lack of a better word, a pathway to higher promotion?
It's always good if you're selected. Not everybody gets to go. Squadron Officer School, most people get to go. I mean, not everyone, but many. Command Staff College is competitive. They do a numerical value for everybody, and they have how many slots do we have for Command Staff. They go down, they draw a line. And those people go to Command Staff, and these don't. And same thing with promotions at a different level. And same thing goes for Air War College. The only thing, the pool gets smaller and the competition gets tougher. But I took full advantage of it. I leaned into it. Some people saw that school as a vacation, and I leaned into it, and that's why I came out as DG, which is good for my portfolio for sure.
You came out as a what?
Distinguished graduate of the Command Staff. And so I've always taken that perspective. I think because my academics were never my bright spot. So if I could do something really well, I wanted to do it. And again, I was tenacious. I worked on my tail off. And so with that, then out of there, let's see, gosh, the Command Staff, and then you not only get the 1-year school, then you get the big present is a year of combat afterward. That's your reward because you've been sitting on your tail for a year. Now you can go fly combat for a year. But that's also good career-wise. You know, you see that sequence.
And what rank are you then?
Major.
Major.
Yep.
And where are you sent? And you was talking about combat. What year is this?
Well, it's 71, 72, and that's the B-66.
Had you ever flown a B-66?
No, no one else. It's the A3 Navy was the same airplane, basically. But this airplane didn't have good engines. It had to do with competition within the Air Force. There was an engine that the A3 got, the 57, I think it was B-57. At any rate, it's a good engine. This got an Allison. It was used, I don't know, it was a missile engine or something, but it was very unreliable. And the airplane was overweighted with ECM equipment. So you have an under-thrusted, overweighted aircraft. And that caused us a lot of concerns. We were out there measuring the temperatures at intake levels and so on. And we had, my wingman crashed on takeoff one day. I can't see to the right of the B-66. I sit left. And so we'd go out and join up, and then he'd join up out of sight and say, blue in, blue two's in. And I took off this day. It was going to be 2 up. I was on a mission, and I'm flying around, and I don't get the call. Blue 2, are you there? No, blue 2's not there. So I switch over to command post. This is blue 1. What's happening with 2? Stand by, stand by. Well, he crashed on takeoff. Well, long story short, he did crash on takeoff, but they survived. What happened, we were so nervous about it, as soon as we felt the lift, we'd pull the gear. We couldn't wait till we saw they locked up and locked. To get over the paraphernalia at the end of the runway, you do everything you could do. You run the engine so they got hotter than they're supposed to, and you lift it off as soon as you could. And what he did, he settled back in and skidded to a halt. They all got out. But
Where are you flying out of?
Karat, Royal Thai Air Force Base.
And where's that at?
Well, it's in kind of, think internal Thailand. It's not down along where Utapao and Bangkok. It's kind of northeast, up in the highlands
Of Thailand?
Of Thailand, yeah. And we took off from there, and of course, you almost due northeast would be Hanoi, and southeast would be the
Now,
southern.
are you flying bombing missions or electronic?
Okay, two versions of the aircraft. One was the what we call ELINT, to collect information where are the SAM sites, and that aircraft in the old Bombay had 4 positions, and they would collect information, find where the SAM sites are to improve the maps. The other guys interesting, the country could avoid them, and that sort of thing. The other model was what I would call ECM, electronic countermeasures, mainly offensive. For example, a B-52 strike earned some protection. There'd be three ships of B-52s coming in. We would take off with one B-66, an ECM model, E model, and 2 F-105 Wild Weasels.
2 F-100?
The F-105,
Oh,
Wild
wow.
Weasels. Now, the Wild Weasel mission, they carried 2 different anti-radiation missiles. And so we would get there before the B-52s arrived. And then we would be prepared to jam, but we'd line our antennas there for the time on target, and the Weasels would be there. So if they did come up, they could fire anti-radiation down that beam and destroy the launch site. But usually enough, we were deterrents being there. You know, we were jamming and watching in the 2 105s. So we worked ourselves very carefully to be in position at TOT for the B-52. So that was very much of one of the things we did a lot of.
Now, how long would you stay time on target?
Well, there was a specific moment in time. If they buried much off of it, in fact, as an old SAC pilot, I'm sitting there being critical of things. What the heck? What's those SAC guys doing here? Now I'm an attack pilot. See, I'm saying, what do you guys? You're 3 minutes later at TOT. What's that nav doing up there?
Oh, you're in TAC now, though.
Yeah, I'm an attack pilot.
Yeah.
Which brings up another thing, because I refueled against the SAC tankers. We had one airplane painted with the tiger teeth, one B-66. So when I'd fly in, I'd come off the boom after refueling, and I'd say, I'd like to pull up right side. Sure, go ahead. So I'd pull from the side and say, hey, Co, wouldn't you like it? Don't you wish you could do this? And then I'd put the nose down and do an aileron around and then fuel. Because I'd say, look at my face, because I had the tiger teeth. A little fun, you know.
Yeah.
Whoops. Well, anyway, so that was basically that year, and then we lost. I mentioned to you earlier, we had on April the 1st, I was working, moving from a department with my good friend.
April the 1st of what year?
Oh, 72, yeah.
72?
Wayne Bolte and I had trained together. He came out of the staff college. All the guys were ex-SAC guys. He was a B-52 guy. And he was a lieutenant colonel selectee. And because of the rush coming from the States, we had people moving in, fighters. We're drawing down ground forces and building up air forces, thinking we can do it there. And so due to that crush, they told us, you guys got to double up. If you're not a lieutenant colonel, you got to double up. So I told Wayne, look, I got a nice little single hooch, and I've got it fixed up. I bought all this wicker furniture. Why don't you take it? I've got to go double up. Anyhow, I'm just a major. So that's what we did. So all day April 1st, we did that in the hot stuff. So the next day, in the morning, he had missed the post in the postings. And so he's going down, he walks by my hooch, he said, are they really pissed? Excuse me, are they really angry? And I said, yeah. He said, I better go down and meet my maker, because the squadron's mad he missed the posting. Well, he turned out he was the pilot of BAT 2-1, which I think I mentioned to you, became a book and then later a movie with Gene Hackman. And of course, the only survivor was Hamilton.
What was his full name?
Gene Hamilton. In fact, at Wright Pat, he had a likeness in the survival area for a long time up there. They've now replaced it with white model heads, but they had a very likeness of him. He was 54 at the time. We thought, an old man, you know, yeah. to survive. I think it was 11 days.
And what was he flying?
He was the navigator. There were 4 EWs in the back, and then my friend, the pilot, Wayne Bolte. That was the ELINT version. And they were flying across the DMZ seeking out SAMs, and they got a call. The warning position for the 4 EWs was the first lieutenant, and it was his first mission in Southeast Asia. And so when the missile call, he said, Sam, break right. And so they did. I'm telling you this because I talked to Gene Hamilton later, live when he was released. They started to turn, and the ranking electronic warfare officer, negative, Sam left. And so at any rate, they did basically this. They did not get into their full maneuver, which was to pull 4 Gs in a dive. And then that's when the SAM hit. And in talking to him later, he said he saw the skin of the aircraft was gone, his plexiglass window was smashed in. He looked up at Wayne because they sat diagonally, and Wayne held up his ejection pin, which is our silent way of saying get out of the airplane. But then he slumped, and that's the time that Gene ejected. So he doesn't know beyond that. There was never any sign of any other life from that aircraft. But when Gene was coming down, a forward air controller was right under him. He got his radio and got in radio contact on the way down, which was pretty phenomenal. And then there's the rescue, the 11-day saga that you wouldn't hardly believe. Someday I'll show you what I have on that.
And he was actually rescued by using the layout of golf courses. Is that true?
That is true. They tried a lot of things. They bombed with B-52s. They put mines all around him, and they've started to use him as bait, I think. So they finally said, we can't lose anymore. We lost so many rescue people. It was unbelievable. I can't remember the number, but we lost the rescue helicopters.
Going in for him?
Yeah. And this thing about not leaving one guy behind, a lot of people say leave him behind, you know, because that's just the way it was. And eventually the general had to say, we can't sustain this. And that's when they came up with the golf maneuver, because he was an avid golfer. He had a memory for directions and so on and so forth, and that didn't need to be encrypted. And so they laid out the course. They got a hold of guys at the base, at Karat, that golfed with them even, and that was eventually the thing. But in getting it done, a lot of stuff happened. And I can do that with you one-on-one sometime, if you want to do that.
Yeah.
It's too much for here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So continue on with your experiences in that year and after.
Well, heck, I did lose an engine on takeoff, and that was.
And that's on a B-66.
Yeah, and again we're overweight. We always refueled because we're too heavy to get off that hot runway, so we always refueled on the way to target. But some aircraft with the EWs ejected downward, so you had to make sure you were light so you get up where they could eject. And but at any rate, I lost this engine almost full. Lost one engine just after on stick, and I sent it to. I now don't know for sure anymore, but maybe to 300 feet or so. And I'm starting to get it to stall, so I put it over. I've got the gear up now, but I have flaps down, and you have to go faster with flaps up. But I'm going down, so I had to put it nose down and started the flaps up, and we wanted to buff it. We were going descending, and I thought, well, this is it. I said, we got to get ready, guys. And but flaps up, another knot. We pulled it out, and I thank my training as instructor, where I taught stalls in B-52, taught them T-39. I did,
There's a crew of 3 on a B-66?
unless you have the pod with the 4 guys in the back, yeah. In this case, it was just 3 of us. But I made a radio call. My friends in the area said, I knew you had something going on, because all I was saying was, emergency, 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 emergency. I mean, it panicked. And I called the tower. I said, clear the runway. Coming the wrong way. I just did it, put it down, heading the wrong way. The maintenance guy came out and said, what was the indication on this circuit breaker down here? And I said, if you don't know about that, I've sent this engine back to the United States. I don't have a bad mouth, but I think I said something what he could do with that engine. Because it was, I didn't care what he did with that engine. You know, we were back on the ground.
So go right ahead with your narrative.
Well, like, you know, the other thing that was interesting over there was the refueling, because we refueled in the monsoons, and that is a sport that you don't want to really do. A probe and drogue, you know, the baskets on the back. One night in particular, I was just being, well, first of all, one of the least liked to navigators.
You were using a probe and drogue method to refuel, not a boom?
You know, B-52 did that, but the B-66 had a probe right out front. And
what plane is refueling you?
135s. 135s. They had refueling tracks all over Laos, maybe 10 or 12 of them. And but in weather, this navigator, nobody liked him. He was a crummy-looking officer. He threw candy into the wind, but he could read it, radar, and take me around storms like nobody's business. And that I only tell you that story because he picked me to fly in his final mission, because I didn't like him as a man. I didn't think he was a very good officer, but he was one heck of a radar navigator, and I'd take him any time. He was doing the job he was hired to do. He probably didn't make major, you know, but he was a good guy doing that. But anyhow, one night you're getting hammered around. You don't get bored. It's not peacetime. You're going to get that gas, and that hose came back and got looped around my probe, and then back to the basket. Now, if you pull back, you're going to take away the probe and the whole bit. And I don't know how I did it. I was being thrown around, and the only way to do it is just fly it, unwind it. And I don't know how I did it. I'm not sure I did it. I think that it got done. And finally, because I have a friend that didn't get it done, he flew home with this great big thing on the front of his B-66. But that was always a problem, because you would get your fuel. You didn't want to go home and say, I couldn't get my fuel, you know. So you got it, you know. So nothing heroic, but
that had to be
slightly terrifying at times.
I would say, yeah.
Yeah. So, because you're going to go regardless. So, at any rate, that I left there in the fall, and that was before we went north, you know, to bomb Hanoi. That happened after I came home. So, in a sense, I missed that action. We lost a B-66 in that process, but he crashed back over home base returning. So I don't have the details of what happened to him. I do know the pilot was weak.
Was weak?
Weak. Mm-hmm. I won't go any further next. I talked to him, trying to explain to him what I did in refueling and that sort of thing. But he'd been SAC headquarters, flying the looking glass or something as a co-pilot. He had rank, he had major, and they gave him too much credit for his rank versus flight experience. And all 3 of them were killed. It was ridiculous. I got the word. I was in Omaha, and I got the word from because this guy had been stationed in Omaha, that his family was set up for Christmas, and just up the street from where I live, about a half mile from where I live. And I said, no, I've got to go. You know, this navigator was killed. They were all getting together for Christmas. And one other guy was in Omaha area from B-66s, and I got him. He said, I'm not going. I said, yes, you are. He said, I'm not going. I said, you have an obligation. We are going to go see that family. We can't. He said, I don't know what happened. I said, I don't either. But we did. We went to see the family, and just to show them we cared, you know.
Right.
So there were times like that, but, you know, if you do what's right, you're okay.
So what were you doing at Omaha? That was SAC headquarters, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'll speak briefly to that. That first assignment back is in computer area, which I know nothing about now at all, but then it was really new. And program management, we weren't computer programmers. And I was challenged, and I pushed through that assignment. I'll put that, I got through it and survived. When I couldn't figure out it was early in computers, really early. And it was primitive almost in many ways, now that I look back on it. But I took a managerial approach. I just put the stuff under my arm. I got laid the job to do. I was lieutenant colonel then. And I just went to the programmers and all those people and said, how do you do this? How do you do that? And, you know, I survived. So that's about all I could really say about that assignment. I got through it successfully. But the general told me as I signed out of there, he said, can you get rid of that computer AFSC? Because the people in your promotion boards don't think that much of data processing. They think of it as a support function. They like combat, operations, you know. And I said, I don't think I can do that. But it was his advice. The guys on your promotion board are, you know, are general officers that came up flying airplanes, operations. So worked out. So let's see, what else we talk about here?
So after Omaha, where did you go?
Gosh, you know, that gets to be so complicated. I think I went back to war college. Let's see, 70s.
What year is this that you were at Omaha?
Okay, I was at Omaha 2 times. And let's see.
This is, you were there, were you there from 73 to 76?
Yeah, that's right. And then that's when I went off to war college. Yeah,
Yes.
73 to 76. And that's what I think I told you then out of war college. Now, war college was another challenge because I had a chance to get a master's program at command staff, and I didn't take it. I was going off to combat, and I thought that wasn't fair to my family to be going to night school. So I didn't do it. Then I get out of the blue, never dreamed I'd go to Air War College. 200 and some people out of the whole Air Force. No, it never would happen. And when they did pick me, I said, I've got to get the master's. If I turned down a master's opportunity twice, I'm a fool. So I went to night school with Air War College to get a master's at Troy University. So
Where's the war college at?
Back at Maxwell.
Yeah.
And if you ever go to Maxwell, they have an airport there. And there's a nice black B-52D there that I flew.
Is that right?
That very airplane. There's also one that I flew at the Duxford Air Museum in England. And there's also one at a Navy museum in Mobile, Alabama, which I have not seen. But my old co-pilot finds these things, and he kept that below.
At the one where in?
There's one at Mobile, a Navy museum of Shanghai.
Yes.
And there's a B-52D there that we flew. So I know where 3 that we flew.
Maxwell, Duxford, and Mobile.
In Mobile, yeah.
I'll make it a point to see one of them.
But the one up here looked just the same. The one up here at Dayton. Yeah.
Dayton, yeah. So how long of a course is that at the work?
It's a full academic year. It's 10 months. And they give you an extra month to finish your master's while you're there. So
now, do you have to write a thesis there?
Oh, yeah. And we tried to write it on the Christmas bombing of 70, and I think I mentioned to you earlier, it got thwarted in classification, and we know who stopped it. And later they came back and said, we want to publish yours. It belongs to their work college. We want to publish it. The trouble is, they kept the text, but they lost all the examples, all the photography, all the testimony, all the other stuff was lost. And the other 2 guys weren't interested in going back and visiting that after all that time. So we just kissed it off. It was an experience. But like I said, I did some interviews that were interesting. Billy Lyons was a friend who was on that attack. And, you know,
what was the Christmas bombing?
Well, you know, we were trying to get out of the Vietnam War. And the North wasn't cooperating, and Nixon finally, when he came in, ordered the bombing of Hanoi to get them at the table. We were already pulling out. They really didn't. that really wasn't a question, I don't think. But he wasn't going to negotiate. They weren't negotiating over the prisoners. And so, at any rate, he ordered the attack. 3 days and extend it if necessary. And I was gone by then.
Where are they bombing in?
They're bombing in the Hanoi area, basically. They're going right in the middle. And at that time, I think they said they had, like, in the whole area, that part of North Vietnam, they had thousands of SAM sites by this time. It was unrealistic. But we lost some B-52s. I can't remember the number now. Some limped back. Because I wasn't there, it's a little less than...
What's the normal number of men in a crew on a B-52?
It's 6. 6, yeah. 2 pilots, two radar and a navigator, and a gunner and a electronic warfare officer. So let's see. We were talking about the arc line.
Nixon actually told them to disregard any orders?
Well, no, that was the incursion over into Cambodia.
Oh.
In Cambodia, we went into a report, we went into briefing, and they said tonight, when you get that call that said the code name for border violation in Cambodia, ignore it. And you're going to go ahead and bomb. And that was... I guess it's the Cambodians were tired of the North Vietnamese marching through their country and back into Vietnam, even though they were also coming up from the Gulf in Cambodia to get to our South Vietnam. But so I think there's tacit approval. But when we got that word, and I've given you the story that came out later about how that was done, and it was covered up. People didn't really know. Oh, the Cambodians knew because they were following over, and the North Vietnamese knew, but they weren't going to complain because they were using Cambodia as a venue. So that became a little bit of a thing. But we did do the first night. It's when they said ignore the boundary call when you fly out of Vietnam and continue to follow the ground radar that was directing us to the strike. And so we did that. But it's just one of those things in history where everything wasn't really, and then they covered it up as if they target in South Vietnam were hit. That's where they got into trouble, the cover-up story. You know, we were bombing Cambodia, but nobody knows it. And so the people who were involved they may have been ordered to do it, but they didn't come out well, you know, so.
So we left off, though, at the War College at Maxwell. After you finished your 10 months there, did you go back to SAC or headquarters? Or?
Okay, what happened there was, first of all, the commandant of the War College had been my wing commander in B-66s in Southeast Asia. And he sat in on I did a Huntley-Brinkley thing about Japan and the nuclear aspect. What did the people, and I found a Japanese student at the NCO school, in language school, and got him over to be in the Huntley-Brinkley thing. Well, the commandant thought that was interesting. He sat in the whole 2 hours of my presentation. Well, I think I shot myself in the foot because I got frozen for faculty. And my assignment's not back to the squadron commander SAC. It's going to be a faculty professor. That's a definite lieutenant colonel end. Yeah, it's a great thing. You live in the one town and your family's happy and all that, but you're not going any further because that's just what happened. Well, I thought, shoot, I'm going to be a squadron commander. I think, that was my goal. So since I knew him, and he sat in that session, I think he liked it. So when I found out I was assigned to faculty, I said, okay, Neil, come on. So I went in and said, sir, I know you're commander, because he was my wing commander at Karat. And I said, I was kind of hoping to be a commander in SAC, squadron commander. And we talked a little bit and so on and so forth. And he said, I'll tell you what, Neil, you get squadron SAC, okay. But if you don't get the squadron, you're mine. So that was
What is this Huntley Brinkley thing?
Well, it's a TV interview, like you're doing now.
Yeah.
I did this with this Japanese NCO, and how his family's impressions of the nuclear weapon, what they think that the current prime minister, I had current information about the current prime minister and what was in the news and that sort of thing. And it was really pretty good because firsthand, you know, he was a kid when the nukes hit Hiroshima, so he wasn't directly affected, you know, health-wise. But
he had been at Hiroshima, or
well, I don't know exactly where they were now. I don't remember. And he was.
What is this? The interview about the after effects of the nuclear?
No, the subject was Japan. Another student talked about cameras and technology out of Japan, and I talked about the military aspects of the
and that's
nuclear.
with Huntley Brinkley?
Well, that was my term for it. We just did an interview back and forth.
Oh,
Like,
okay.
what is your father's impression of the present prime minister and what he said? And what did you think? And what is your father's impression now about Americans? And you know, that kind of stuff.
Oh, okay.
Just general discussion. And but I think he went over to the commandancy, and then he locked me into faculty. And oh dear, you know, I wouldn't have been a good faculty member. I would have.
So how did you get to return to SAC then?
Okay, well, then he cut me loose. He cut me loose, so SAC assigned me to Loring Air Force Base as an aircraft commander. They're not one to give you a title before you earn it. So I went up there as an aircraft commander. I'm kind of long in the tooth here to just be an aircraft commander, but that's the way they send you. And then the wing commander will look you over and decide, and they'll look at you and later decide. And so I went in as an aircraft commander, and when the aircraft commander shipped out, then I moved up to squadron commander, and that was really an eye opener. Yeah, really an eye.
What squadron was that?
69th Bomb Squadron. It was in many ways I didn't realize the importance of command. I got things done that. In ways that shouldn't have been done, but I had to get the job done. For example, I got a sergeant who volunteered to come to Loring, a tech sergeant, as a gunner. My ranking guy was a staff sergeant, and all the rest are 1 and 2 stars. Why is he volunteering? Well, the truth was he came with a disciplinary file, and I got this file, and it said I'm supposed to take action on those disciplines. And I remember from leadership school and stuff, you got the job here. So I put it down and I called him in. I said, look, you got this problem. You got a problem with alcohol. You've had these issues. But I need a gunner, a senior gunner. I need some rank, and I need some young kids. If you keep it clean, you keep it and do your job here, I'll not open that file. And that's where we left. And he took charge of that crowd, and that worked out really good. So there are things like that one guy's had a car accident downtown, and I'm getting ready to go to the officers club. My boss comes over to the DO and says, "You've got a DOA to identify." You know, so I got to go down to the morgue and look this kid in the face, and because I have to write the letter to mom and dad, you know, those kind of things. So those are just things you don't really think about. And then we had a drug bust in the alert facility, and my gunner is there. Marijuana, they're on alert in the basement. I led this guy, but he had screwed up. And the 8th Air Force commander, get him out of here. You know, that was it.
Right.
And I had no recourse to separate him from the Air Force as a staff sergeant. Brightest young kid and everything. The other guys, but he should have known better. He's on alert.
Yeah.
I should have known better, but I had no choice. Now the officers, there's procedures, you know, but for the NCOs, they're gone. You know, they're just gone. The Air Force commander called us into the command post and said, "Okay, who are the squadron commanders of all these people?" And everybody, I want them out of here. I don't want to contaminate my force. I want them gone. Wasn't any question. You know, wasn't any question about it. And, you know.
What year is this? And
Well, it's 79, maybe. something like that. Let me take a look here.
Hello. We took a little break, but we're back now. And there's a topic that I'd like for you to cover for us, if you would, Neil. And that's in 1973. You were the interviewer or
POW debriefer, yes.
POW interviewer. Tell us about that.
Okay. I was sitting at SAC headquarters and somebody said, would you like to do this? You'd have to had a combat tour and be a captain or above. And I said, well, that would be a distinct honor. So we had training for about a week or two of what do you expect and how are we going to question them, what are we going to put in the database, you know, all these kinds of things. A little bit of international law. What does the code of conduct require? And I thought it was a great opportunity, and a lot of people shrugged and didn't want to do it. But after the training, I went to Andrews Air Force Base, and it was going to be in the hospital. That's where they're going to bring these guys back. Now, once they were flown out, they were flown out to Clark. Now, to jump ahead a little bit, I was assigned one person, Jim Haichu. He retired as a colonel, but he was had been held for 7 years. So when I got there,
what was his name?
Jim Haichu, H-I-T-E-S-H-E-W. He's now deceased. But before he arrived, and knowing he was coming, his wife and family arrived. And I met them and explained my role. That was to get the story from his takeoff to shoot down. That was the main thing, and to help him in any other way to adjust to what was going on. We were also told that if there's any question of behavior, that I had full power to delete it. If he didn't want it in the tape, I wouldn't put it in the tape. That was the thing. So at any rate, so I get out there early and I meet the wife. And I said, and I got a folder and I said, Plattsburgh, that's the same unit I was in. Ironically, they left the summer of 77. Anyhow, I moved into their quarters that they had moved out of, and this is the guy I'm going to debrief with. But she said, you know, whatever you can do, that's great. We'll get along great, whatever we can do. So
you meant 67, didn't you?
I meant that 70. See, time had passed. I had moved out of there, and he moved out. That's what I'm trying to say. He moved out, and I got there in '66, moved into this unit. He had left there just prior to go to F-105s.
Right.
So we had that in common. That was a strange thing.
Okay.
But anyhow, eventually the guys arrived. But when they went to Clark, they were given a folder. And they opened this folder, and there was a savings program for POWs. I don't remember the right terminology for it. But he sees what his net worth is. He sees a picture of his wife, who's become grayer-haired, 7 years. His kids were like this. They're grown. But worse than that, his father had died and his brother had died, neither of which he knew until that moment. So now there's all the question, did I behave honorably under questioning, torture, et cetera, et cetera. So he's got all these people are full of this stuff. So
he was a POW for how long? 7
years. And so I met all the other debriefers, and we also could compare notes, So when he arrived, we had, I worked with his family, but what I did, I just started the day you took off, what happened next, what happened next, what happened next. And then, of course, it was how he got into camp and the treatment and the question interrogations and all that sort of thing. But it went well, and the family was very supportive. Anything you do to soften this situation. So I just thought it was a great opportunity, and some of the cases were just heartbreaking. One guy's wife has been living with someone else, all this time, and she hasn't shown up yet, and the daughter's there, but she's pregnant, out of wedlock, things that the guys don't need this, they're coming back with this problem. But 7 years is a long time in any marriage. It doesn't matter if it's just a long time. Right. Things happen. So anyhow, it was rewarding. I really felt like I did a job, and And I was rewarded for it. It got into my records. I didn't know it was going to happen, but it did. And I just thought it was a good thing. And I was always a McCain supporter, even politically, and I don't want to get into politics, but largely because I know he went through a lot more than a lot of critics have done. So he's been there and done that. So that's mainly about the POW thing.
What was the feeling about this uniform code of military?
Oh, you mean ID card, only give your serial number and all that stuff? Well, you know, they started in with that code, but it was untenable. It was untenable. Resist to the best of your ability is what came to pass. You remember seeing on pictures where they're doing the finger or they're tapping out number. You know, they're resisting as best they can. You know, but some of the guards were not as nasty as others. One of our work college classmates was way up north somewhere, and he got into kind of a relationship, you know, conversation with one of his guards, and during the Christmas bombings, he said he came rushing in, Ty, B-52, Hanoi, B-52, Hanoi. So they kind of had been together so long, maybe they were further away from the center of power in Hanoi, I don't know, but it was a tough time for these guys coming back. It was really tough, really tough. So, yeah, there's every night we go to the bar. I can't remember the black officer's name. Doggone, he's one of the most notable POWs. I met him too. His shoulders were permanently. They tried to break him because he was black. They thought they put him with a Caucasian, and but a lot of time in isolation and pulled his shoulders and everything. But there was a lot of people attributed religion. He attributed his resistance a lot to his training, Very, very admirable guy. I can't come up with names at this time. That happens with age. But it was one of the highlights of experiences that you just don't take you out of your comfort zone, but you know it's worthwhile. So that's about all I want to say about that.
Okay. Well, I'm glad we covered that. It had to be a meaningful part of your career.
Yeah. As I told you, too many little things in 30 years that they all are interesting to me. But
so it shows here that in 1982 you moved to the Joint Chiefs of Staff in Washington.
Yes, that's a fact. I was a chief of the Nuclear Contingency Branch, and you might ask, what is a nuclear contingency? That's something other than the SIOP, lesser nuclear expenditures. For instance, when we have a major exercise in the Pentagon, I headed a team. We had two 12-hour shifts, and my nuclear experts, we bring them from Navy, Air Force, wherever they were, and formed up this team, the Operational Nuclear Planning Group. And what we were there to do is when the chiefs are talking about what we're going to do about this crisis, they say, we think we should drop a nuke here. We would run it through all these experts and come up with what, if you're going to do it, it should be this, it should be that, or maybe not at all, you know. But that's what we did in all the major exercises involving NATO and U.S. But one of the brighter things I got to go to the NATO nuclear planning conferences over in Shape in Europe each year, and hear what the Brits are doing and every other people are doing, because there are nuclear weapons in most cases that had to be released for their employment, and it was kind of a pleasant part of the job, you know, to go see what was going on in Europe. In fact, I was a little misfit. I was a strategic guy, and this is all about nukes at the infantry level and not just Air Force. It's nukes, you know, of all natures and all kinds. And education for me, in fact, I was undereducated when I took the job in that area. But that lasted for a full tour. And I was coming up on retirement. I was 27 years. Most colonels are out, but they offer them some kind of a job, or your family doesn't want to move or something, and they get out. You know, nobody goes 30 years. But at the time, I wanted to stay partly because my daughter was in treatment at Walter Reed, and I wanted to stay. So I got a 1-year extension on CHAP, what they call Children Have a Potential. But that was running out. And about that time, I was in this nuclear contingency branch at the time. a lieutenant colonel from the Command and Control Division came down to my office. And he said, "Colonel, I hear you want to extend." I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, you ought to take the Command and Control Division." I said, "This is a higher level than my current job." I said, "But I've never even worked in a command post." I said, "Why do you say that?" He said, "I just think you ought to go ask the general." And I said, "Okay." So we walked up to the general's office, walked in, and Bill said, "I brought Colonel Ray up. He wants to talk to you about the Command and Control job." And the general said, "Well, Neil, I'll put it this way. You want it, you got it." I was hired by the subordinates, really. They'd been working down the hall for maybe 3 years. I thought that made me feel really good. They asked me to be their boss, and I get carried to mandatory retirement. And the package for doing that went down to Admiral Hardesty, one of the best Navy officers I've known. He was an aviator too, but he was the J3 at the time. And he sent back a blazing support letter, better than anybody would get to replace, et cetera.
What was his name?
Hardesty, Hunt Hardesty. He had been PACCOM command, and he may have later been chairman even after that. He's since deceased. But one of my two favorite officers were Army and Navy, I'm sorry to say, J3, both supported me so strongly. So that was very, 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 very satisfying. And then the job was bigger than me at the point, but I had experts. I had such experts working for me that I think I told you I went out and ran an assessment at the chairman's direction. Every year we had to visit each nuclear command headquarters and run an exercise we called Praetorian Guard. There was a simulated, the president may be gone, maybe it's devolved to you're the only military authority.
This is about designated survivors, so to speak.
Yeah, it's either vice president or the House of Representatives. The devolved
so you're playing the role
of the acting president, if you will, because he's been taken out. Washington's been taken out. We're going to go airborne and kneecap and try to keep this war going. Get for the free world. So. My boss was an admiral, 1-star, and myself. We would run these exercises for training. There's new guys come in all the time, heads of the services, 1-star, 2-star, 3-star, and including the chairman. We trained the chairman. I went with 3 people, myself, an expert in the nuclear options, and a warning person. And we trained the new J3 himself when he came into the job. In this area, tactical warning, nuclear warning, and nuclear options and that sort of thing. So where was I with that? But anyhow, what we did, we set up these scenarios. They fly off the White House in HMX helicopters, and it becomes, and they fly them to rendezvous with perhaps NECAP at the time. They don't have a NECAP now, the National Emergency Airborne Command Post of 747. Maybe rendezvous with them somewhere when they get out of Dodge, and we would practice it from the Pentagon heliport, which happens to be where 9/11 got right there. That's where it hit. But we'd get on the helo and then we'd go to some place and rendezvous with NECAP, get on board, and we'd have maybe 5 or 6, 8 general officers, senior officers, sitting in the back of the theater. My boss would be. He's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and I would be the acting president or devolved authority. So they work up, here's what the battle's doing, it's doing da-da-da-da-da-da, and they make recommendations to the chairman, which is my boss, Admiral Flannery, and then he looking for my decision, and I will always remember the Commandant of the Marine Corps sitting behind me one day, and he came up to, I acted naive again, and I said, "Oh, that bald head on the back, I thought you'd be a little smarter than that." It was a 4-star. I don't know. You get into the darn, then you hear people talking. There's a White House guy there, and he's talking about the air conditioning, and Nancy's not going to like that. Even there's different people in there, Somebody from the White House is talking about Nancy Reagan, because she had a lot of slack, I guess, at the White House. They're talking about, she's not going to like that, the air conditioning going down like that. I think they were, we'll look at the airplane because it's similar to Air Force One, see what they were going to do. So these experiences are irreplaceable. I mean, they're just really, really rare things. But at any rate, let's see. I did retire then after that stint. But I had a funny thing happen on the way to retirement. That did what it did. It took care of everything for me in that regard. And then I was told by one of my former subordinates that was over at the White House, you ought to apply for this job over at the White House military office. This is another one of the guys in that same office that hired me in the first place. So I got all this civil service pages after page after page. The only trouble was they put it out for general, 30 people applied. I know exactly what the job is. So I could answer it way better than anybody else. And then I went to the interview. There were 3 interviewers. One of them was a former lieutenant colonel subordinate of mine. So I got hired.
And what was your job?
Well, here's the thing. I can't tell you. But the job title was Chief of the Office of Program Coordination. And it was...
This is 1988.
Yeah. This is a time when we were trying to see if we could survive as a nation under nuclear war, and how could we do that, and these sorts of things. And there's a lot involved in being the White House military office. Where are all the hideouts for the president or survivors? Where are they? How did he get there? Where are the fuel stores? What's hidden here and what's hidden there and why and how? You get under Department of Agriculture. Might have a room down here where there's something, and they've got one person in the Department of Agriculture as a point of contact. You can't have everything out military for Armageddon. When that time comes, there's going to have to be other places to do things, and that's a big CIA. Everybody gets involved in that thing. But
that's still classified. What you did there?
Oh, yeah. It's more than classified. It's compartmented and classified. In other words, you might have. When I was the Chief of Command and Control Division, I had 12, 13 compartments. And only one other guy in my office had the same compartments. So we could only lock each other's safe. No one else could get any one of our safes, because some had some of it and some didn't have that. It's kind of a weird situation. People would brief you in, and then I went to meetings JCS wide with other J5, and they start briefing on the thing with the Soviets, and they can't do that.
Now you were actually in briefings with the Joint Chiefs of Staff?
No, these are staff discussions.
Okay.
Staff discussions. Well, it's a staff discussion that wasn't about me or anything else, but they're talking about another program with the Soviets. And I hear a problem because I know another program that's going to use that same facility. They're both special compartments. Very few people here. And it should have been coordinated to the general officer, and it wasn't. And so I went to my boss. I said, "Boss, there's a problem." And he said, "Okay, we'll just have to read that J5 guy into the program." We got him, and then he realized that it was a conflict. So it made it hard to do some things because you can't talk to everybody about everything,
Right.
And so when I left, I wrote them all down because they're top secret, but that's not. But then the first thing when I'm on the job, I really can't get into the job, but I walk in. Now I'm a GM-15. They did give me that grant, although I lost all my military required pay at that time, all but about $20,000. Anyway, it wasn't for money that I did it. But they said, "You know what? We're going to run an exercise on the defense of Camp David when the president's in residence. How would you like to stand in for POTUS, for the president, for the exercise?" I said, "Yeah, I'll do that." So I haven't even started my job duties. It had nothing to do with that. So we go up to Camp David and go in, and where would I stay? Aspa, presidential place. Now I've got one President Bush's middle age is with me, and I've got Secret Service with me. I see all where they would put him, why they would put him, when they'd move him, what they would do. But I don't have to do anything. All I have to do is eat MREs and move when they tell me to move. So that's kind of the way it went. So, they're attacking on the south side. We better go underground, or we better go over here, and they'd move me, and so on and so forth. And then it comes time to. Now they had a Mrs. POTUS too, a young. I think she's a major, Army major from the military herself. So she's my wife when that was necessary in this whole role. So after all this done, the attack has gone down for the day and everything, you're going to put us to bed. And there's a place for the president, and there's a place for an aide. And I told this young girl, I said, you'll always want to be able to say you did. You sleep in the president's bed. I'll take the room off the side for the aide. And so all these guys at prison and everything saying, good night, Mr. President. It was just one of those funny things that happened. It had nothing to do with the job, but it just happened, Yeah. And it was funny because I'll tell you one thing that I really wasn't amazed when Eisenhower had Khrushchev in Aspen. It appeared to me, the way it was explained to me, it was a long hallway. Khrushchev and his people were on this side, and Eisenhower and his group were on this side. In the same building. Now that would never happen.
No. Was that at Camp David?
Yeah, Aspen is the presidential lodge. There are several others. When Sadat was there and Jimmy Carter, they used several cottages. But Aspen was the presidential lodge. And of course the aide was very familiar because he was up there with Bush all the time. And he would say, here's what we do. He would invite them in for movies at times. And the projector was the enlisted guy outside and the projection booth. So he didn't really come into the living room, but they could see the movies. And they had the sound system on the floor and all these other things. So it's, and then I got to see what's actually in the water tank, and things that don't look like what they are, what they really were. And it's overnight. And do you know how Camp David came to be?
From Roosevelt.
And why?
Huh?
And why?
With Shangri-La, he called it, but...
that was because that was the name of his boat on the Potomac.
The Shangri-La?
Yeah, well, that was that, and that's why the Navy and the Marines have control of Camp David. They were naval people, and they were looking for a place because there was no air conditioning. It was cool in the mountains. They looked at a couple places, but that's why they settled up there, to get away from the heat. But because the Marines run it, and it all comes from when they did away with the yacht, as I understand it, when they did away with the yacht, those same people, the chefs, the cooks and stuff, went up to Camp David. Oh. That's the way I understand it. So anyway, it was another experience that you just can't,
Yeah, you've had more experiences than the average bear.
I know. That's what I told my wife. You can't have an interview. We don't have a day.
We'll be here for 2 days.
Yeah, it's been...
Do you how many returning POWs would you say that you interviewed?
Oh, I was assigned to one person.
Oh, you?
One person, one-on-one. And I was there for like 2 weeks. Yeah, I had my time each day with him. And then, of course...
How was his adjustment to life, though, after...
I think it was okay. They did tell us in training that we would be friends for life. That is the way it happened, and didn't happen most people. But we got along well, and I assured him that if he doesn't want it on tape, it's not going on tape. But you have to understand, we didn't have any digital media. I had a reel-to-reel and yellow paper, and I'm taking notes, kinda. I'm not a shorthand person. And then I would come back, listen to it at night, and try to mark which parts, and then talk back to him and run it. It was really laborious, but we got it done. They wanted to know, like for instance, I know why CIA wanted ultimate retribution on some of those turnkeys, guards, because some of them are unusually cruel and mean. And so part of these checklists were to identify how many POWs might still be up there. They would get reports like a guy walked in with red hair and he sounded like he might have been a Marine. He walked by. That'd be one report. Someone else said, I know that Lieutenant so-and-so was shot down on such a day. They started correlating, did we miss people? Were the people still up there? So a lot of the questioning had to do with that. They get remember, and they're torturing, and they do that various things. So yeah, it was something else. But, so anyhow, when I was in the job at the White House for 2 years, and it got me totally untenable, and it was a good thing that I got out. But then I said, well, my wife was hanging around the house, fishing up in West Virginia and stuff, and said, I think you need a mission. Yes, I know people go out on disasters, the Red Cross. So I called up National Red Cross, and I said, I understand you like military people. I said, oh yeah, we got an Army colonel up here and so on and so forth at the national headquarters. But what you got to do, you got to go to the local chapter and get training. So I went to the Alexandria chapter and got trained in disaster actions. And first thing I went out on was the LA earthquake. Went out there for a month, in 1994. And from there I went to ice storms in New England and hurricanes in Florida, and I did that for 10 years. No pay for 10 years.
At no pay?
Well, I got a free room at the Holiday Inn. But my wife was working. She went back and got her degree, and it wasn't going to retire in 2001.
Now, you told me earlier, I think, that your wife was a librarian at across the river at Fairfax, Virginia?
Well, yes. Yeah, a county library. She was managed one of the larger libraries. I think at one point she had nearly 60 subordinates. She was a good commander, good boss. I watched her. I mean, and some of the volunteers, the retired guys, would say, you know, your wife runs a good shop. And I could see it when it was time to shovel the snow out there. She was out there with them.
That's a big library there, important library too.
Yeah, there's a regionals. She had a regional. There's several regionals in the area, Fairfax.
Would she have a master's degree?
Yeah, she got it at Catholic University. After I retired, I said, you ought to get yours. And she did, and then that year, that entree. Since she retired, then in 2001, right after the last thing I did with the Red Cross, I had done an airport exercise with the Red Cross at the National, now Reagan, back in '90, AirX 90, as like simulated commercial crash. And so the people I worked with there at the Red Cross, when 9/11 happened, they called me up and said, you want to get out to the Pentagon? I said, sure. So I only spent one weekend, but I did work at the site at the Pentagon after 9/11. That happened to also be the year my wife retired. And surprisingly, later, I get this letter from Secretary of Defense, Neil C. Reed, volunteer Red Cross at the site of 9/11. So I got this deal on the wall from Rumsfeld. He was the Secretary of Defense at the time.
How soon were you at the Pentagon after the plane flew into it?
Oh gosh, I don't know. It wasn't, maybe a week, I don't know. Yeah, I was at the weekend, and I don't remember what day of the week it occurred. I don't remember.
Where were you at when that happened on September the 1st? Do you recall?
Yes, I do. I was having coffee at a bagel place with a bunch of veterans, a bunch of old buddies.
At a bagel place?
Yeah, we were all having coffee, and I went out and got in my car, and the other guys ahead of me lived near me, and I hear this on the radio, and I hear he stop and say, "Get on your radio," you know, and that's where we were at the time. Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, I didn't have any great insights into it, but I got this picture of the guys hanging the flag of the Pentagon, and then a note from Rumsfeld signing. I mean, it's a nice, nice thing to have.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I lost my train of thought there for a minute.
That's okay.
Well, I'm just going to have to make up another question because I lost my train of thought. I was thinking about 9/11.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts about the Vietnam War today?
Well, you know, that's a good. It's a good question, and I don't know the answer. I don't think it's a sorry case that we lost 50-some thousand people. I mean, it really is. There wasn't enough definitive objectives. I don't think Johnson had the nerve, and maybe he was right. I don't know what I'd have done in the same position. If you thought China was going to come all aboard, if you really believed that, I could see you equivocating. He was hung up Nixon had no such reservations, I guess. That's why the POWs really like Nixon, because he freed them, in their sense. But I've had that geopolitical question in more ways than one. I had it with President George Bush, which I thought was great, because he had been trained by Reagan. He had so many jobs that Reagan didn't mess with, but he did, and he was really well qualified for it. But when it came to the Kuwait, Iraq and Kuwait, he went, did a coalition, and then stopped, and he took a lot of heat for stopping. But history says maybe he was right. Maybe we should let Iran and Iraq work it out themselves instead of us getting into the battle. So it's hard to go back and say, but it's as you've heard at the club, those stories of the Marines on the ground, knowing they were going to get slaughtered. It's just a sad thing. I mean, I will have to say there are some fears in flying and so on. But at night you go back to go to bed, and you don't have that absolute certainty of going into a battle like those guys have done. Everybody calls everybody in the military now a hero, but to me the hero is the guy that goes in when he doesn't have to first, and then secondly the one that goes in spite of an order that he doesn't agree with. It's I couldn't second guess that. It's a sorry thing. I spent a lot of time down at the wall when I lived in Washington a long time, and when the protests got going down there, I went down one day. Big mistake, because the protesters are up here, and then the park police are on the horses over here, and I'm ready to go to battle. I told my wife, I got to get out of here. I'm going to get involved in this. I'm going to be rioting with somebody here. I'm not sure. It gets emotional,
Sure.
Because the protesters, they were valid. They had their reasons to hate the Vietnam War, but that wasn't me. I was on board. I was an all the way in or all the way out person, and that's the support my squadron members got from me. If they were in, they were in, no problem. But don't.
Mm-hmm. So. Brian, do you have any questions?
A few questions.
Oh, yeah.
So why the Air Force? Why did you get involved in the Air Force as opposed to like ROTC, but why that as opposed to say the Army or Navy?
Well, that's a good question. The answer is it sounded better. I honestly didn't, being able to fly, see, you picked it at your freshman year. At that point, I had no idea that I'd ever be a pilot. It just sounded like a better thing to do. I had it was exotic compared to the Army and so on, which I knew nothing about either. I'm naive. I'm 18 years old. But I just thought it sounded better. Then when it came to decide at my sophomore year whether to go into advanced, that's when I had a decision. I was 20 then, and I'd thought about it, and I'd seen the Air Force at an elementary level, for 2 years. So by then I had a reason to make a decision, and I wouldn't have had to go to Air Force, but that's where I'd started. And I always did like the idea of flying. I never dreamed I'd be able to do it. I mean, there's no reason why I should have. And today, actually, I shouldn't have, and I'll tell you why. I was quail hunting in Kansas.
What?
I was quail hunting in Kansas, hunting abreast, getting ready to go to the car, and I'm on the hill, a bit of a hill, and a quail flies out. I said, "Hey guys, there's a quail out there." They came back around, boom. I'd never been shot before. I screamed. I've got BBs, and I've got one right there. It's still there today. If I'd hit my eye, I'd been done right then. About 25 years earlier. So there's reasons of why things happen. I should never have been a pilot. I have a deviated septum. It's unacceptable. And I've had it since high school. And I've gone through all the flight physical. I'm telling you the truth here now. This is the honest to goodness truth.
We can't take your retirement check away from you. Go ahead.
That's right. I had gone to flight physicals for advanced ROTC. I've been to summer camp, and I'm for the final flight physical. I've seen the doctor, and the airman comes up, he's looking at my ears, and oh my gosh, you've got a deviated septum. You got this far, I'm not going to stop you. That's not a pilot's nose. So I had two reasons why I shouldn't have succeeded in the Air Force.
Well, thank goodness for that enlisted man.
Enlisted man and a bad shot. So, you know, things happen. And I've made one person very, very mad. You should not have gotten in. You didn't have the right. Am I going to say, please don't let me go forward? I don't think so. I like integrity, but you know, there are limits. So
when you did your first flight, like solo, is there any kind of sort of tradition or any kind of, I don't know, you get something like you know what I mean? Like, I mean, you get your wings, but I was wondering if there's any sort of unofficial.
Well, that's after a year and a half. You get a year of training, you get the wings. Solo is a big deal. After 8 hours of flight, I barely got there, and my instructor kept getting on the controls with me. It aggravated me terribly. And one day we did a touch-me taxi back, and I had him unstrap, and he wasn't on the controls. I just thought he was, and that's about 8 hours. So that's a big deal. And I don't have it with me, but we wear a ball cap, a yellow ball cap, and then we painted the bill black, and then you painted Solo the T-34, one the Tweety, and the little bird I do a bird on, and the T-28, about 20 or 30 days separate times. That was a pride around the base of Malden, Missouri. Everybody walked around and had, he's flown them both, you know, because the T-28's a big airplane. It was a big transition because it was a big airplane. So yeah, there's prestige for that, but not till you got the wings did it mean anything, not really, because people were still being sent home regularly crying. Guys that wanted to be in Air Force pilots since they were this big, and they wash out, and they're crying, packing their suitcases, saddest thing ever.
Sure.
And some guys did what I would never do, we call it SIE, self-initiated elimination. I just don't see myself doing that, you know, and I said, and that's not me. I'm going to stay till they kick me, you know. So, and that's why my son, and everyone will tell you, my word is tenacity, because if you try it and fail, you learn a lot. If you can get up and go again.
Were you taught that from a family member, or where do you think you got that from?
Oh, I don't know. I think it was fear. I think it was fear that I would fail. It really was. I felt like I was starting to fail in college. I didn't know if I was going to fail at something else, and I had a big responsibility back to my community, little village. The only guy who got to college, I represent the village, you know, in my mind. Relatives who loaned me money, it's all in my head, and so I was. That was kind of my approach to life. So I adopted the thing of tenacity, just keep on plowing, and you fail a check ride, you'll fly again. You know, just keep on. And it's you asked my son. You know, anybody, you get in my computer programs, use tenacity. You can have them. You can get into passwords. You know, but that's kind of the way it is. But anyhow, back to I wasn't married then, and I didn't get married till I was just short of 29. But best thing ever.
What did your parents and grandparents think about you when you became a pilot? Were they?
Oh, I think they were happy, but my dad was scared to death. My dad was scared to death. He was not an emotional person. He would like to. He had been a geologist. That wasn't my bent. But he was scared to death. I mean, when I went to Vietnam, he sent me a letter, you know, take care. It was about all he could, you know, we aren't the huggers people. We're the
arm's length.
If you put an arm on your shoulder and to shake the hand, that's intimate. That's intimacy. We were not huggers, you know. And for my dad to do that good luck, son. You know, that was all he could muster. You know, but he was scared to death. I picked him up flying with another guy. Eventually, in a light airplane. The guy's a Navy veteran with 10 or 15,000 hours, And my dad was I said, come on, Dad. So he went. He said, I kept watching you on the pilot. As long as you're smiling, we're okay. So I got him to fly. I thought, boy, that was a great deal. And you know that pilot crashed and killed himself about 3 months later. And my Dad, there you go. So the guy had all kinds of hours and everything else, but that proved to my dad that this is too dangerous. But he was afraid for me. He really was.
Sure.
Yeah. But I made him proud. He was working in the gas field in Kentucky, down near where the school is, right mid-state. We had a low level route called Orange Tree, went right through Kentucky.
Lexington?
No, it's on down. But anyhow, we had this route, and he's out there working in the gas fields as subordinate. And I said, Dad, I'm going to fly Orange Tree next week, and we have to make every corner within 2 minutes. So I know where you have this, there's a sawmill or something down here. I said, if you watch, I'm going to go down that valley, and I'll be within plus or minus 2 minutes on a certain date. So he got all his workers out there, and of course I can't see them, but I know where that valley is, where that area is. So we went down that valley, but it would equate to a bit wagging the wings in the B-52. And so that was feedback. He could, that's my boy, climb down the valley. So he did see me in flight like that. So
you guys were flying awful treetop level almost.
About 300 feet, something like that. Yeah.
Well, I was in the woods in Lee County, Kentucky, next to Breathitt County, and just walking, hiking by myself. And you guys came over one day and scared the living daylights out of me. You were so low.
Well, that's probably
B-52.
That was probably Orange Tree, because we let in. It starts with a B, mid-state. Where the
Beattyville?
Oh, it's right on the.
Midway.
Huh?
Starts with a B?
Oh, where's the college where people, they have a restaurant and everything in it? The students actually work in the restaurant.
That's over Berea.
Berea, yeah.
Well, it was you then, because that's right down the road.
Exactly. Berea was approximately the entry point, and we went west, and then we hooked around to the south and came back east, and back around to basically a looping thing called Orange Tree. They call them oil burner, Orange Tree oil burner. And it was just practice low-level navigation using train avoidance.
Scared the dickens out of me. I know that. I said, and
Yeah.
the B-52 flying over.
Yeah, we did a lot of that. We had another route out of Loring. We went up into Canada and went low-level clear out to Lake Michigan. And then we popped up and bought up the nuclear power plant on the southern coast of Lake Michigan as the final thing. That was pretty, but you could see moose and everything. You busted along at 300 feet. Just before you got to Lake Michigan, there was kind of a valley you're going down through, so you really felt like you're down there scooting. And it was pretty good. And then you turned south and did pop up and bomb, went home. So.
Well, most of the guys I think we've interviewed in Vietnam have been Army guys.
Yeah.
For the most part. And we haven't done a lot of Air Force guys, but I think you mentioned that you were flying out of Thailand? Where were you?
Yeah, Karat.
Okay.
Karat.
And did we have a military base there?
It's a Royal Thai Air Force Base, but we were co-located.
How would you spell that?
Karat, K-O-R-A-t.
And so how long would it take you to get to Vietnam? How long was
Yeah, I'll always say it's not long, but we had refuel en route, and then sometimes we would be covering a bomb strike, and then we would fly across and go out over the water and wait for the next time, and then come back in, and then do another one, and that sort of thing. Now the B-52, we flew out of 3 locations. We flew out of Guam and Okinawa and Utapao, 3 locations. Out of Utapao with the 40,000 pounds of bombs, that old B-52 would climb a few hundred feet, and I've had one case where I almost had to withhold. I almost didn't get the bombing altitude before target time. I mean, it was an hour, maybe, I don't know, depending where the target was. But but we were loaded down internally and externally with bombs, so that old beast, no problem out of Guam, you're flying hours and so on. But nor out of Okinawa, but out of Utapao was pretty quick mission. I don't imagine our missions were there 7 hours altogether. I don't imagine something like that.
And when you went on a bombing mission, how many aircraft was involved? Was it all B-52 You were in a formation?
Typically,
out of those?
typically it was 3-day 52s when I was flying B-52s, because the unique thing about Vietnam is that there's very little to aim at. The radar set in Europe, for instance, you could get a bridge, and let's say you don't want to hit, you want to hit over here, but you have a nice steel bridge or build it, and the navigator can lock onto that, and the computer will figure out where this target over is here, and you can, they call it offset aiming point. You have something to aim at. Even though you're going to bomb over here, you're on something known. You get in Vietnam, there's a mountaintop, 2,000 feet across. You got this big fudgy distance. So for precise bombing, it wasn't so good. So a lot of what we did was 3 ships laying down for marshalling areas where the Viet Cong on the trail would build up trucking areas and marshalling areas. Those became targets, an area target. It gets the bad term of carpet bombing, but it has some aspects of that. But we very precisely, with the winds and everything, put down 3 tracks of bombs. You might be flying like this, but the bombs should fall in 3 even tracks into that area target. So there's a lot of that. Because we didn't have anything precisely to aim at. You could in Hanoi, but basically most of the rest is countryside, mountaintops, and imprecise points. So a lot of our releases were like that, or they had a thing called a miscue site. It's a ground-based pencil beam radar, and they would pick us up. We would fly in certain points all the way from Guam to point Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, and then they would say at that point they will pick you up. The miscue site would say, Bongo 55, this is PQT, whatever, maintain heading, pick up 209. From that point, he would guide us to where he wanted us to release, because he knows what he wants to hit down there. And we're there as a weapon system. We're an artillery source. In fact, on the radio, it came, heavy artillery, quadrant such and such. It's usually a B-52 strike, because that's going to lay down a pattern. But he would direct us more specifically. And if there were any ground troops, in support of ground troops, that's what we always did. Because in precise, I mean, you would be close air support was not the thing to do, but the B-52 in rural terrain, because you don't have that sharp aiming point. And so it always made you a little nervous if they said it's in support of ground troops. And that would usually be a miscue guide, because he would know he's going to lay down these 3 tracks right here because the Marines are over here, you know, that type of thing. So.
What other aircraft besides the B-52 was the Air Force using in Vietnam?
Oh my gosh, there were a bunch. But the ones I had association with, of course, also the Navy, of course, is involved. But at Korat, I'll go to Korat, we had tankers there, SAC tankers, a couple. We had C-121s in different command post configurations. I don't want to get into all that. But active fighters, we had F-4s, F-fighters, fighter bombers, and then we F-105 Thunder Chiefs, which were the Wild Weasels in that case. It wasn't a fighter bomber, but they were the ones with the ATOLs and the Shrike missiles to go against the SAM sites. And we flew in formation with them. We ate with them at the mess hall. We got eat by squadron, and the B-66s and the Weasels, because we flew together, we ate together. Then we had the F-4 and the F-105 Weasels and the B-66. Now those are the 3. We had a couple tankers from SAC there, but these were the primary ones. But you said did we fly together? We always had a tanker, and we always went on in ships of 3 usually. But when I was in the B-66, we had an all-out assault in the, I guess it was either just north of DMZ. I can't remember what the objective was, but I got the feeling we were taking it to them. It felt like one of these World War II movies. We're up there, we've got F-4s, we've got tankers, we've got F-105s. We must have had, 20, 30 airplanes going up over the ocean out there. And you felt like, we're going to get them today, you know. You felt like you're really going to get it. It was a good feeling. You're not out there alone. It was a big thing. But that was the only time I was in a mass situation like that. I mean, the most uneasy times was B-66, because it was vulnerable because we couldn't go as fast as the fighters. They went into Hanoi at 500 and off, and we couldn't keep up with them. And my squadron commander was suicidal. He thought we should go anyhow, but they didn't. They wouldn't slow down for us, so that was negative. But what they did do, a lot of our stuff is in South Vietnam. But when we went north, they put us in an orbit for our jamming capability, and that made me a little uneasy because we lost 19 aircraft out at Krat just in 1972. 19.
You lost 19?
In that 1 year. Now, I was there part of 70, the year before, and part of this year. But we lost 2 B-66s in there, but 17 in F-105s and F-4s. And the sorry things that happened, the guy would take off in the morning, they'd never hear from him again. You know, what happened? Right. One case, and I saw the recovery when he came back in the helicopter. The guys lost all power in the weather over in North Vietnam or North-South Vietnam. And the navigator on mag compass said, turn them west, and punched the clock until they ran out of fuel and they ejected. But we didn't know where these guys were. They knew they went up, the fence was hostile area. But they knew they entered hostile area, never heard from them again. Tanker coming about U Pao, he hears a beeper. And he reports it, and he comes back, chase the beeper. He's up just northeast of Bangkok. He had flown bag compass till he ran out of gas and ejected. And they were way down in Thailand, and they recovered him.
Wow.
And so I was there when he got out of the helicopter. He was one happy son of a gun. Because they didn't have anything in the airplane, no power, no nothing, except the mag compass, and then punched out. So you've got all these stories. I also saw an airplane blow up. I was going down on my bicycle. I pulled off in the tower, so I knew how I had access all the time. And saw these fire trucks going. I went up to the tower to see what was going on. And F-105 had aborted on the runway. Now he's got the ATOLs and the strike missiles and fuel. And he's aborted sight at the end. I'm looking at nearly a mile now. He's at the end of the runway.
What's he flying?
It was Wild Weasel 105. Oh. So he's loaded like we would fly the mission, but he'd aborted on the runway. And so I'm looking down there, and fire trucks are coming in, and it's all kind of indistinct because it's far into the runway. Suddenly, boom! Smoke went up that stack, and I think that, what in the heck? What happened? He boarded, the fire truck responded, the DO was there, and they started foaming the airplane down. The Thai firemen were on the airplane, and one of those strikes blew up, and it killed 4 firemen, and the DO was walking away. I don't know how far he was. I didn't see him fall, but it hit him in the back and knocked him forward. He was walking away. He wasn't badly injured, but that was wow. The kind of situation. But one night we were in a rainstorm. We were cooking steaks out in the officers' club, if you will, in the rain, and we heard roar of air, and boom, boom. Everybody just stopped cooking because somebody ejected, And that was an aborted takeoff. But the 105 had a zero capability. They both got out of it. They punched out at zero altitude because the thing kicked them up enough, and they had enough velocity to survive. So things like that happen all the time. Keeps you on your toes.
I guess.
Yeah.
Were there any Air Force bases in South Vietnam?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You didn't fly out on those, did you?
I had the rare situation of serving Vietnam and having never put my feet on the ground. That's a fact. I took off from the day I told my wingman crashed. I think I told you that story. They thought maybe it was fuel contamination. So I said, get on the nearest runway if you can. And I looked at and I was going, Da Nang was a Marine base. So Da Nang, or back to Ubon, which is in eastern Thailand, that's where the gunships were and that type of thing. And I thought, I don't want to go to Da Nang. I may not get out of there. So I landed at Ubon because they suspected fuel contamination. But that's the guy that sucked the gear up prematurely and crashed. That was that story. But it lent me another little experience because that's where the gunships were operating out of C-130s. you know, with the Anna. And a war college friend of mine was, being a command staff college guy, came out to meet me because he saw me or heard I was on the ground. And he said, "Oh, I just came back last night. Let's go look at my film." So I watched that film of all those little people and trucks and the boom, 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 boom. You know, that C-130 gunship, you know, the 40 millimeter cannons. Amazing stuff. I mean, I don't know.
Wow.
I'm glad I didn't do that. But, so. Well, this is what my wife was afraid of. It would turn into a bull session, and I'd talk all day.
I just got a couple more questions. And,
okay, all right.
I know you probably don't know the statistics, but I mean, I wasn't sure if you'd done much research with POWs, but I was wondering what percentage of the POWs were Air Force, do you know?
No, and I can't even give you numbers anymore. There was a time, I saved some materials and stuff. I do have some stuff at home, but no, I couldn't tell you that. I never did numbers on that. The answer is no. I really don't know. Some awful things happened. There's an attempted escape. People got tortured as a result. The turnkeys, the guys, some are worse than others. They talk about the Cuban. He was cruel. They getting your arms out of your sockets, you know, tied behind your back and stuff. Just be on your knees because you didn't do something properly, and it's amazing. It's really amazing that they survived it at all. The later shoot downs, like Bob Hudson was actually at Omaha with me. He was a young guy, and he was one of the B-52 guys. And of course, he was only POW he got shot down in the Christmas raid. And of course, he got out in April, and he was. So he was a POW, but he got the better end of that war, you know, the 3 months or whatever. So there were some guys that didn't suffer the same way as those first shoot downs, 7 years, 8 years down. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's only impressive.
Well, I've got a feeling we could go on here for a little bit longer, and we don't have the whole story.
You could ask my son or my wife, and I guarantee you.
But I tell you, I'm really proud and glad that we had a chance to have this interview.
Well, I'm glad to have done it. It'll be valuable to me, even if they don't want to listen to it.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you, though, for your service to our country.
Thank you.
And for your continued patriotism.
Well, I thank you for what you do for the Air Force and the military.
Thank you, sir.
Your history program is great. Not the least is the club. I mean, the Hornet. I think that's
on the Hornet, yeah.
And the thing about the Hornet Club is that it's more vital than any other veterans association I know, because it's got the meat of it.
Right.
You know, there are all kinds of organizations, the BFWs and all the other things you can do. But generally, they're mostly bragging places.
Right.
And learn how to. I joined one in West Virginia. I wanted to find out where good fishing spots were, but that's mainly it. You know, drinking beer, talking fishing, and that. But the Hornet Club serves a different purpose. I think it's a great one. I hope that, unlike the Metallic Club, which ran out of leadership, I hope we have somebody backing you up coming along.
I do too.